Imagine discovering a ship drifting alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The cargo is untouched. Food is still on the table. The captain's belongings are still inside, but every single person on board has vanished. No bodies, no signs of violence, no explanation. This is the terrifying mystery of the Mary Celeste, one of history's greatest unsolved disappearances. If you love true crime, historical mysteries, and disappearances that still can't be explained, subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next investigation. In the late 1800s, the Atlantic Ocean was one of the busiest trade routes in the world. Every day, ships carried cargo and passengers across thousands of miles of unpredictable sea. But among those vessels, one would become the most famous ghost ship in history, the Mary Celeste. Originally built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, Canada, the ship was first named Amazon. After changing owners several times and undergoing repairs, she was renamed Mary Celeste. Although she had experienced an eventful past, by 1872 she was considered seaworthy and ready for another transatlantic voyage. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste departed from New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. Her mission seemed straightforward: deliver a cargo of more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, a valuable but highly flammable shipment used for manufacturing and commercial purposes. At the helm was Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a highly respected and experienced sailor with years of maritime experience. Fellow captains described him as calm, capable, and deeply religious. He had successfully completed many voyages and was known for putting the safety of his passengers and crew above everything else. This voyage was different from the others because Captain Briggs wasn't traveling alone. Joining him on board were his wife, Sarah Briggs, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. The young son remained at home with relatives so he could continue his education, while the rest of the family prepared for what they believed would be another routine crossing of the Atlantic. Alongside the Briggs family were 7 experienced crew members. They had carefully prepared the ship, inspected the sails, and secured the cargo before leaving New York. Nothing suggested that the voyage would become anything other than an ordinary journey across the ocean. As the Mary Celeste disappeared over the horizon, no one on board could have imagined that history would remember this voyage for a mystery that remains unsolved more than 150 years later. The weather during the early days of the journey was generally favorable, and there was no indication that disaster was about to strike. But somewhere in the vast Atlantic Ocean, something happened aboard the Mary Celeste, something that would leave the ship sailing on without a single soul on board. In just a few weeks, another vessel would make a discovery so strange that it would become one of the greatest maritime mysteries ever recorded. Nearly a month after leaving New York, the Mary Celeste should have been approaching its destination in Italy. Instead, on December 5, 1872, another merchant ship, the Dei Gratia, spotted a vessel drifting alone in the Atlantic Ocean, between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Ships often crossed paths on these busy trade routes. But as the crew of the Dei Gratia watched from a distance, they noticed something was wrong. The Mary Celeste wasn't following a steady course. She drifted unpredictably from side to side, her sails hanging awkwardly in the wind. No one could be seen standing at the helm. No lookout watched from the deck. And despite repeated signals from the Dei Gratia, there was no response. Concerned that the ship might be in distress, Captain David Morehouse ordered a small boarding party to investigate. As they climbed aboard the Mary Celeste, an eerie silence greeted them. There were no voices. The investigators immediately noticed that several of the ship's sails had been damaged. Some were torn, while others hung loosely from the rigging. Although the damage suggested the vessel had encountered rough weather, it wasn't severe enough to explain why an experienced captain would abandon an otherwise seaworthy ship. Then they discovered another strange clue. The ship's lifeboat was missing. Its ropes had been cut or released, leaving only empty davits where the boat should have been. It appeared that whoever left the Mary Celeste had done so using the lifeboat, but why? As the search continued below deck, the mystery only deepened. The cargo, more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was still on board. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. Valuable supplies remained untouched. Food and fresh drinking water was still available. If pirates had attacked the ship, why would they leave behind such valuable cargo? Captain Briggs' cabin revealed another unsettling detail. Personal belongings were exactly where they should have been. Clothing remained neatly packed. Important papers were still inside the cabin, although some navigational documents and the ship's chronometer were missing. There were no signs of violence. No blood. No evidence of a struggle. The ship itself was still capable of sailing. While it had taken on some water and needed repairs, investigators believed it was far from sinking. Which raised one haunting question. Why would Captain Benjamin Briggs, a respected and experienced sailor, abandon a ship that still had every chance of reaching land? By the end of the inspection, one fact had become painfully clear. The Mary Celeste had not disappeared. It was found, but every single person aboard had vanished without a trace. No bodies were ever recovered. No confirmed sightings were ever reported. And to this day, the fate of Captain Briggs, his family, and the crew remains one of history's greatest unsolved maritime mysteries. The discovery of the abandoned Mary Celeste shocked the world. How could an experienced captain, his family, and 7 skilled sailors simply disappear without leaving behind a single clue? As news spread across Europe and America, newspapers filled their front pages with speculation. Wondered if Captain Benjamin Briggs had deliberately abandoned the ship to collect insurance money. Others even suspected that the crew of the Dei Gratia, the ship that found the Mary Celeste, had staged the entire incident for the large salvage reward. But as investigators looked deeper, the evidence simply didn't support these claims. Captain Briggs had a reputation for honesty and integrity. His financial records showed no sign of desperation, and the value of the insurance was relatively modest compared to what he stood to lose. There was also no evidence linking the crew of the Dei Gratia to any wrongdoing. Eventually, the insurance fraud theory was largely dismissed. The next theory was piracy. Had pirates attacked the ship, kidnapped everyone, and escaped? At first, it sounded possible. But when investigators examined the Mary Celeste, they found something that didn't fit. The cargo remained untouched. Food, water, and valuable personal belongings were still on board. If pirates had attacked, why leave behind thousands of dollars worth of cargo and supplies? There were no signs of violence. No blood, no bullet holes, no struggle. Without evidence of an attack, the pirate theory quickly lost credibility. Another popular theory suggested mutiny. Could the crew have turned against Captain Briggs? Some imagined a violent uprising that forced the captain, his wife, and daughter from the ship. But once again, investigators found no evidence. The crew had strong reputations and years of experience. There were no signs of fighting. No damaged cabins. No weapons. Nothing indicated that anyone had been attacked. Without proof, the mutiny theory remained nothing more than speculation. Some researchers turned to nature for answers. Could a giant wave, sometimes called a rogue wave, have swept across the deck? A massive wall of water might have frightened Captain Briggs into believing the ship was about to sink. Perhaps he ordered everyone into the lifeboat. The problem with this theory is that the Mary Celeste showed surprisingly little damage. A wave powerful enough to force the entire crew to abandon ship would likely have left far greater destruction. While impossible to rule out completely, investigators found little evidence to support it. Today, Many historians believe the most likely explanation involves the ship's cargo. The Mary Celeste was carrying more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Investigators later discovered that several barrels were empty. One theory suggests that alcohol vapors may have leaked into the cargo hold. Captain Briggs may have feared an explosion. To protect everyone on board, he could have ordered the crew into the lifeboat while the Mary Celeste remained attached by a rope. If that rope snapped during rough seas, the lifeboat would have drifted away, while the Mary Celeste continued sailing without a single person on board. Although this theory explains many of the clues, it has never been proven. Without survivors or new evidence, the mystery remains unsolved. More than 150 years have passed since the Mary Celeste was found abandoned. Despite countless investigations and theories, no one knows exactly what happened to Captain Briggs, his family, or the crew. What do you think happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? Was it a tragic accident, or is there another explanation? Share your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe and join us for more true crime, disappearances, and unsolved mysteries every week.